The massive chamber stretched beyond comprehension, its curved walls disappearing into shadows that seemed to swallow light itself. Thousands of seats rose in concentric circles around a central platform, each one occupied by beings so alien that human minds struggled to process their forms. Some delegates pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Others appeared to be living crystals that sang in harmonics that bypassed the ears entirely. The air itself hummed with translation, fields working overtime to convert hundreds of different languages into something resembling communication. At the center of this cosmic amphitheater stood a single human figure, dwarfed by the sheer scale of the Galactic Council's Judgment Hall. Ambassador David Cross adjusted his simple black suit, the fabric looking almost primitive against the backdrop of technologies that bent physics to their will. Above him, holographic displays showed the accusations in scrolling text that hurt to look at directly. The silence was deafening. 40,000 representatives from across the galaxy focused their attention on one small planet's envoy, and the weight of their collective gaze could have crushed mountains. High Counselor Vex of the Hegemony Prime rose from the highest seat, his form a towering mass of scales and biomechanical enhancements. When he spoke, his voice boomed through amplifiers that made the chamber's walls vibrate. Human Delegate Cross, you stand before the assembled powers of the galaxy, accused of the most serious crime imaginable. Your species has been charged with systematic deception, technological fraud, and violation of the sacred doctrine of honest disclosure. David's response was a slight smile that somehow managed to look confident rather than nervous. High Counselor, I appreciate the gravity of these proceedings. However, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about humanity's actions. A ripple of movement passed through the assembled delegates. The Quantum Collective's representative, a being of pure energy contained within a geometric frame, pulsed with what the translation systems rendered as indignation. Misunderstanding? Your kind presented themselves as barely capable of interstellar travel when first contact was established. You claim to be a young species seeking guidance from your betters. We never claimed to be primitive, David replied calmly. We simply answered the questions that were asked of us. When your survey teams inquired about our fastest vessels, we told them about our chemical rockets. When you asked about our energy production, we described our fusion reactors, all true statements. Commander Thork of the Iron Fleet, a massive cyborg whose body was more machine than organic matter, leaned forward. But you failed to mention your true capabilities. Our intelligence networks have detected technology signatures that should be impossible for a species of your development level. David nodded thoughtfully. Commander, when you first visited our system 12 years ago, what did your scanners detect? A single inhabited world, limited infrastructure, fragmented political systems fighting primitive conflicts. Thork answered immediately. And when we requested admission to the galactic community 3 years ago, a unified world government, basic faster-than-light capability, crude but functional weapon systems and breed, came the mechanical reply. All accurate assessments, David said. But tell me, Commander, did your scanners detect our orbital manufacturing facilities? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Thork's cybernetic components whirred as he accessed his ship's sensor logs. Negative. No significant orbital infrastructure was detected. What about our deep space monitoring stations? None detected. Our defense platforms? None detected. David's smile widened slightly. Yet they were all there, weren't they? Right where your sensors should have found them. A murmur of unease rippled through the chamber. High Counselor Vex's scales darkened to a deeper shade of crimson. What are you implying, human? I'm not implying anything, High Counselor. I'm stating a fact. Your technology failed to detect our presence because we didn't want it to. David turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. For 12 years, every time you scanned our system, every time you sent survey ships or monitoring drones, you saw exactly what we wanted you to see. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Hundreds of delegates began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony that overwhelmed the translation systems. Some rose from their seats in anger. Others retreated deeper into their shells or protective fields. The chamber erupted in a chaos of sound, light, and electromagnetic radiation. Vex slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor, the impact sending shockwaves through the chamber's structure. Silence! His voice cut through the noise like a blade. Human Cross, you claim your species possesses stealth technology advanced enough to fool the combined sensor arrays of the galactic community? Not just claim, David replied. Demonstrate. He touched a small device on his wrist and the chamber's lights dimmed. Through the massive transparent walls that offered views of space, the assembled delegates could see the Galactic Council's mobile headquarters surrounded by the usual escort fleet. Massive warships from dozens of species formed protective formations around the station, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Computer. T-Cloak Task Force 7, David said quietly. Space itself seemed to tear open. Between the visible escort ships, reality rippled and twisted as dozens of vessels materialized from nothing. They were sleek, predatory things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their very presence warped the space around them in ways that hurt to observe directly. The chamber fell silent, except for the sound of several delegates collapsing in their seats. Those ships, whispered Yara of the crystal hegemony, her crystalline form flickering with distress. They've been there the entire time? Since before this meeting began, David confirmed, along with another 200 vessels positioned throughout this system. We've been escorting your escort fleet without you knowing it. Admiral Krex of the Warsinger clans, his 6 arms trembling with barely controlled rage, accessed his tactical displays. Impossible. Our sensors show no trace of those vessels even now. Because we don't want you to see them, David explained patiently. Humans learned long ago that the best way to survive is to be underestimated. While your civilization spent millennia fighting over resources and territories, we spent our time learning, watching, preparing. High Counselor Vex's voice was barely controlled. Preparing for what? David's expression grew serious for the first time since entering the chamber. For the day when we would no longer need to hide. The implications of his words settled over the assembly like a shroud. 40,000 of the galaxy's most powerful beings suddenly realized they were not looking at a primitive species seeking their approval. They were looking at something that had been studying them for over a decade, learning their weaknesses, mapping their defenses, and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. The question now, David continued, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence, is whether this council is ready to discuss humanity's true position in galactic affairs. Because whether you realize it or not, the balance of power shifted the moment we decided to stop pretending to be harmless. Outside the chamber walls, the human fleet hung in space like sleeping predators, their very existence rewriting everything the galaxy thought it knew about the small blue world called Earth. The emergency session convened in the Council's most secure chamber, buried deep within the station's core and protected by layers of energy shields that could withstand stellar explosions. The walls pulsed with a faint blue light that indicated maximum security protocols were active. Only the highest-ranking delegates had been permitted to attend this unprecedented gathering. Ambassador David Cross sat at a curved table that placed him at the center of attention, but no longer as a defendant. The shift was subtle yet unmistakable. Where hours before he had stood alone in the judgment circle, now he occupied a position that suggested negotiation rather than prosecution. The change in seating arrangements spoke volumes about how quickly the Council's perception of humanity had evolved. High Counselor Vex studied holographic displays that showed detailed scans of the human vessels still maintaining their positions around the station. His scaled fingers traced patterns in the air as he manipulated the data, searching for answers that seemed to slip away like smoke. These energy signatures make no sense. Your ships register massive power outputs, but our sensors cannot identify the source. That's because you're looking for technology you understand, David replied. Fusion reactors, antimatter containment, zero-point energy taps, all impressive achievements by galactic standards, but ultimately limited by the laws of physics as your civilizations understand them. Commander Thork's cybernetic eye telescoped as he focused on the human ambassador. Are you claiming to have transcended physical law? Not transcended, reinterpreted. David gestured to empty air, and a holographic projection materialized showing Earth's solar system. Your species see a star as a massive fusion reactor, useful for providing light and heat to nearby worlds. Humans see it as the galaxy's most abundant power source, just waiting to be properly harvested. The projection zoomed in to show massive structures orbiting within the sun's corona, their forms barely visible against the stellar fire. They moved with purpose, drawing energy directly from nuclear fusion and channeling it through conduits that bent space itself. Stellar engineering, breathed Yara of the crystal hegemony, her form flickering between states of matter. The theoretical energy requirements for such construction would exceed the combined output of 1,000 civilizations. Only if you build them the way your civilizations would, David explained. Humans approach engineering differently. Instead of fighting natural forces, we learn to redirect them. Instead of building massive structures to contain stellar energy, we convince the stars to organize their own output. Admiral Krex slammed 4 of his 6 fists against the table. Enough riddles. Speak plainly, human. How did your species achieve such advancement in secret? David's expression grew distant as if recalling events from long ago. 50 years ago, when your scout ships first detected Earth, humanity was exactly what your reports described. Chemical rockets, primitive electronics, a fractured world still learning to cooperate. But we had one advantage that your analysts missed. He paused, letting the silence build tension. We had been watching the stars for much longer than you realized. Radio telescopes, deep space observation arrays, particle detectors. For centuries, we had been collecting data about galactic civilization without you knowing we existed. We learned about your technologies, your conflicts, your weaknesses. The chamber erupted in angry voices as delegates realized the implications. They had been observed, studied, analyzed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Bex's voice cut through the noise. Impossible. Our communication networks are encrypted with quantum algorithms that would take millennia to decode, unless you understand the underlying mathematical principles better than the people who created them, David said quietly. Humans have always excelled at finding patterns in chaos. Your quantum encryption was based on theoretical frameworks that our mathematicians had explored centuries before you achieved spaceflight. He activated another hologram, this one showing streams of intercepted data flowing between galactic civilizations. Trade routes, military deployments, diplomatic communications, even personal messages between lovers separated by light years. All of it laid bare before human intelligence gathering systems. We knew about the hegemony's plans to expand into the outer spiral before your own admirals received their orders. David continued. We watched the crystal hegemony's experiments with temporal manipulation and improved upon their designs. We observed the Iron Fleet's cybernetic integration, protocols, and developed countermeasures for every one of their tactical doctrines. Commander, Thork's mechanical fingers sparked as his system struggled to process the revelation. You're saying humanity has been preparing for galactic contact for decades? Preparing for galactic survival, David corrected. We studied your histories, your patterns of behavior. Every species that revealed advanced capabilities upon first contact was either absorbed, controlled, or eliminated within a generation. The strong devoured the weak, the clever manipulated the naive, and the powerful crushed anyone who threatened their dominance. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably as they recalled civilizations that had vanished from galactic politics, after displaying too much potential. So we chose a different strategy, David continued. We would appear weak while becoming strong, seem cooperative while preparing for independence, act grateful while positioning ourselves to survive whatever came next. Yara's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. The deception spans decades. Every interaction with your species, every cultural exchange, every trade agreement was calculated to maintain this illusion. Not all of it, David said, and for the first time his expression softened slightly. Our desire for peaceful contact was genuine. Our interest in learning from other civilizations was real, but we learned early that in galactic politics, the naive don't survive long enough to become wise. Admiral Krex accessed tactical displays that showed the current positions of major fleet elements throughout the galaxy. If your intelligence gathering is as comprehensive as you claim, then you know about our reserve forces. The hidden fleets, the secret weapons, the contingency plans every civilization maintains. David nodded. We know about the hegemony's planet killer stationed in the void reaches. We're aware of the crystal hegemony's experiments with reality manipulation. We've tracked the Iron Fleet's automated dreadnoughts hidden in dead systems throughout the galaxy. His smile returned, but now it carried undertones of absolute confidence. We know where they are, how they work, and how to neutralize them if necessary. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees as the implications became clear. "What do you want?" Vex asked, his voice barely controlled. "What humanity has always wanted," David replied. "To survive, to grow, and to explore the galaxy without fear of extinction. The difference is that now we have the power to guarantee those things for ourselves." He stood, walking to the chamber's viewing portal where the lights of human vessels were visible against the starfield. "For 50 years, we've been the galaxy's best-kept secret. We've watched civilizations rise and fall, observed wars that consumed entire systems, witnessed the destruction of species who trusted too easily or revealed too much too soon." When he turned back to face the assembled delegates, his eyes held the weight of absolute certainty. That phase of human history is over. The question now is whether galactic civilization is ready to adapt to the reality of humanity's presence, or whether it will repeat the same mistakes that have defined interstellar politics for millennia. Outside the chamber, space itself seemed to hold its breath as 40,000 civilizations waited to learn what role they would play in humanity's vision of the future. The War Council that formed in the aftermath of David Cross's revelations was the largest gathering of military leaders in galactic history. Deep within the Council Station's Tactical Command Center, holographic figures representing fleet commanders from across known space materialized around a massive strategic display. The chamber hummed with the energy of dozens of FTL communication arrays working at maximum capacity. Admiral Krex of the Warsinger clans stood at the center of the assembly, his 6 arms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the gathered commanders. "We cannot allow this precedent to stand. If humanity's deception goes unanswered, every minor species will believe they can manipulate the galactic order with impunity." General Wrath of the Dominion Forces, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the tactical displays, activated a 3-dimensional map showing human fleet positions. "Our combined analysis indicates approximately 200 vessels in this system alone. Substantial, but not insurmountable if we coordinate our response properly." "The technology concerns me more than the numbers," admitted Captain Zella of the Voidwalkers, her ethereal form flickering between dimensions. "Stealth capabilities that defeat our sensors, energy systems we cannot identify, construction techniques that seem to violate established physics." Commander Thork's cybernetic components whirred as he processed battle scenarios. "Technology can be overcome with sufficient force application. The Iron Fleet maintains 43,000 automated warships in reserve. If we mobilize everything, you would sacrifice millions of vessels and accomplish nothing." The voice came from behind them, causing every warrior in the chamber to spin toward the source. Ambassador David Cross stood near the chamber's entrance, having somehow passed through security systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of intrusion. Krex's combat instincts triggered immediately, 4 of his arms reaching for weapons that weren't there in this supposedly secure location. "How did you get in here?" "This chamber is protected by 7 layers of security barriers." 8 layers, actually, David corrected, walking calmly toward the central display. "You missed the quantum encryption lock on the environmental controls. Clever design, but it relies on mathematical principles that humans mastered 3 centuries ago." General Wrath's exoskeleton powered up, weapon systems activating despite protocol violations. "Guards, security breach in the tactical center." David raised his hand and every electronic system in the chamber froze. Weapon systems powered down, communication arrays fell silent. Even the tactical displays suspended their constant flow of data. The only light came from emergency bioluminescent strips that couldn't be remotely controlled. "Before you attempt something regrettable," David said conversationally, "perhaps you should know that this conversation is being monitored by the entire human fleet. Any hostile action against me will be interpreted as an act of war against Earth." The threat hung in the air like a blade. These were military leaders who had conquered star systems and crushed rebellions, but they found themselves helpless in their own command center. Captain Zella's form solidified as she focused her dimensional abilities. "You're one being against dozens of the galaxy's most experienced military commanders. Even with your technology, the odds are not favorable." "You're thinking tactically," David replied. "Humans think strategically." He gestured to the frozen displays around them. "Tell me, how many of your most critical military installations are currently experiencing technical difficulties?" The answer came in the form of panicked reports that somehow reached them, despite the communication blackout. Emergency transmissions from across the galaxy, all reporting the same phenomenon: fleet headquarters losing control of their systems, strategic command centers going dark, weapons platforms powering down without authorization. Admiral Krex's voice was barely a whisper. "How many of our systems have you compromised?" "All of them," David answered simply. "For 12 years, humanity has been quietly integrating monitoring systems into every piece of technology you've purchased, borrowed, or stolen from us. Every quantum processor we've shared knowledge about contains hardware-level access points. Every navigation algorithm we've contributed to galactic databases includes hidden functionality. Every cultural exchange program has included intelligence operatives who planted software upgrades in your most secure networks." The magnitude of the infiltration became clear as more reports filtered in. The hegemony's dreadnought fleet was dead in space, their engines refusing command input. The Crystal Hegemony's reality manipulation devices had shut down, leaving their Starshaper weapons useless. The Iron Fleet's automated vessels had turned their sensors inward, scanning their own systems for threats that didn't exist. "This is impossible," General Wrath snarled, his exoskeleton sparking as it tried to re-establish communication with his forces. "Our security protocols, our firewalls, our isolation procedures were designed by civilizations that think in terms of barriers and walls," David interrupted. "Humans think in terms of infiltration and integration. We don't break down your defenses. We convince them to let us in." He activated his own communication device, and suddenly the chamber's displays came back to life, showing the scope of humanity's technological penetration. Networks throughout the galaxy lit up with human access nodes, revealing a web of control that stretched across every major civilization. "The beauty of it," David continued, "is that you helped us do it. Every time you requested technical assistance, every joint research project, every cultural exchange, you invited us deeper into your systems. You were so focused on learning from us that you never considered what we might be learning from you." Commander Thork's mechanical eye focused on the displays with growing horror. "The scale of this operation. It would require coordination across multiple generations of human intelligence operatives. 57 years of planning, to be precise," David confirmed. "From the moment our radio telescopes detected your first communications, we knew this day would come. Every human involved in galactic contact has been part of this long-term strategy." Captain Zella phased partially out of reality, a defensive mechanism her species used when confronted with overwhelming threats. "What do you want? What is humanity's endgame in all this?" David's expression grew serious as he looked around the chamber at the assembled military leaders. "We want what every species wants. Security for our people, freedom to grow and explore, and assurance that our children will inherit a galaxy worth living in." "And if we refuse to cooperate with your vision?" Admiral Krex demanded. "Then you'll discover what happens when humans stop being polite," David replied. The lights dimmed around them, and for a moment the assembled warriors glimpsed something in the humans' eyes that made them remember why predators were feared throughout the galaxy. "Your civilizations have spent millennia defining strength through military might and territorial control," David continued. "Humans define strength through adaptability and preparation. We've spent 50 years studying your weaknesses, mapping your dependencies, and positioning ourselves to survive whatever comes next." The systems around them flickered back to full functionality, but the demonstration of control had made its point. "The choice is simple," David concluded. "Work with us to build something better than what came before, or discover what happens when humanity stops pretending to need your approval." He walked toward the chamber's exit, pausing at the threshold to deliver one final message. "You have 12 hours to decide. After that, the galaxy will learn why humans are the most dangerous species to ever achieve spaceflight." The door sealed behind him, leaving the most powerful military commanders in galactic history alone, with the knowledge that their age of dominance was ending, whether they accepted it or not. The decision was unanimous and swift. Within 6 hours of David Cross's ultimatum, every major civilization in the galaxy had committed to a coordinated military response. The largest fleet assembly in recorded history began forming in the depths of space, far from human observation or interference. High Counselor Vex stood aboard the bridge of the Hegemony flagship Eternal Dominance, watching as vessels from 47 different species converged on the rally point. The sight was magnificent and terrifying. Bioships that pulsed with living energy, crystalline vessels that sang harmonies capable of shattering planets, mechanical dreadnoughts bristling with weapons that could crack moons. "Status report," Vex commanded, his scaled fingers gripping the command throne as tactical data flowed across the bridge displays. Admiral Krex materialized via hologram, his 6 arms coordinating multiple data streams. "Fleet assembly proceeding ahead of schedule. Current count, 87,000 combat vessels with more arriving every hour. The combined firepower represents the accumulated military might of galactic civilization." "And the human infiltration protocols?" Vex asked, though he dreaded the answer. General Rath's mechanical voice carried undertones of barely controlled rage. "Our technical specialists have identified and isolated the human access nodes. Emergency protocols have been implemented across all fleet networks. Communications are limited to hardwired connections and quantum-encrypted channels that predate human contact." Commander Thork's image flickered as his systems processed the massive logistical challenge. The humans cannot have anticipated this level of coordination. Their revealed fleet strength suggests they expect smaller conflicts, not total galactic mobilization. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Simultaneous strikes against every known human position throughout the galaxy, delivered by overwhelming force that would render their technological advantages meaningless. No deception, no complex strategies, just the brutal application of superior numbers. "Execute Phase 1, Vex ordered. Across the galaxy, the largest military force in history began to move. The first sign that something had gone wrong came from the outer sensor networks. Captain Zella of the Voidwalkers, monitoring deep space communications from her dimensional scout ship, detected anomalies in the quantum foam that suggested massive displacement events. "Admiral Krex," she transmitted across the encrypted channels, "I'm reading spatial distortions throughout the target zones. Something is displacing enormous volumes of space-time." Before Krex could respond, the distortions resolved into nightmarish clarity. Where the galactic fleets had expected to find isolated human vessels, space itself seemed to be unfolding. Like origami made of stars and darkness, massive structures materialized from nowhere, their geometry so complex that organic minds struggled to process their shape. "What are those things?" whispered a hegemony captain as his sensors tried to catalog the emerging constructs. The answer came from David Cross himself, his image appearing on every command bridge in the galactic fleet, despite their isolation protocols. His expression was one of disappointed resignation. "Those are defensive platforms," he explained calmly, "each one capable of projecting force shields across entire star systems. We call them Aegis stations, and they've been waiting in parallel dimensional space for exactly this scenario." Admiral Krex's tactical displays showed the impossible truth. Hundreds of the massive platforms were emerging from hyperspace folds throughout the galaxy, their presence rewriting the strategic balance of the entire conflict. Each platform registered energy outputs that exceeded the combined fleets facing them. "Impossible," General Rath snarled. "The energy requirements for dimensional displacement of such magnitude would require the output of multiple stars." 16 stars, actually, David corrected. "We've been harvesting stellar energy directly for 30 years. Did you think the Dyson spheres around Sol were just for show?" The revelation hit the assembled fleet commanders like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just achieved stellar engineering, they had weaponized it on a galactic scale. "However," David continued, "before this escalates further, I should point out that your fleets are currently surrounded. The sensor displays updated to show the terrifying truth. Human vessels were materializing throughout the galactic formations, their stealth systems dropping to reveal the scope of their infiltration. They hadn't just monitored the fleet assembly, they had been embedded within it from the beginning." Commander Thork's cybernetic eye telescoped as he studied the tactical situation. "They're inside our defensive formations. At these ranges, they could cripple command vessels before we could respond. But we won't," David assured them, "because unlike some civilizations, humans prefer solutions that don't involve unnecessary destruction." Captain Zella's dimensional senses detected something even more disturbing than the surrounding fleet. "The space around us is becoming unstable. Reality itself is being manipulated on a massive scale." "Dimensional anchors," David explained. They prevent emergency jumps to hyperspace while maintaining normal physics within their field of effect. Think of them as safety measures to ensure this conversation concludes without anyone doing something regrettable. High Counselor Vex felt his authority crumbling as the scope of humanity's preparation became clear. How? How did you predict our every move with such precision? Because humans are very good at pattern recognition, David replied. Every civilization in this fleet has responded to perceived threats in exactly the same way for the past 1,000 years. Mobilize overwhelming force, attempt to crush the threat before it can respond, then negotiate from a position of strength. It's a predictable strategy for predictable minds. The bridge displays showed detailed analyses of every species' military doctrine, complete tactical assessments of their weapons and defenses, and psychological profiles of their command structure. Humanity had studied galactic civilization with the thoroughness of scientists examining laboratory specimens. We know how each of your species thinks, David continued. How you make decisions, how you respond to fear, how you rationalize aggression. We've been watching you fight the same wars over and over again for 50 years. Admiral Krex's voice was barely controlled. What do you want from us? Evolution, David answered simply. Your civilizations are trapped in cycles of conflict that waste resources and prevent growth. You fight over territories when you could be exploring new galaxies. You develop weapons when you could be developing technologies that benefit everyone. The dimensional platforms began projecting holographic displays that showed alternative futures, galactic civilizations working together on massive engineering projects, joint exploration missions to distant galaxies, scientific cooperation that pushed the boundaries of physics itself. This is what humans offer, David explained. Not conquest but cooperation. Not domination, but partnership in something greater than any single species could achieve alone. General Wrath's exoskeleton sparked with frustrated energy. And if we refuse? Then you'll continue fighting the same wars, making the same mistakes and stagnating in the same patterns until younger civilizations surpass you entirely, David replied. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. Other species are already reaching out to us, and we prefer to work with visionaries rather than relics. The truth was sobering. While the major powers had been mobilizing for war, dozens of smaller civilizations had been quietly establishing diplomatic relations with humanity. The galactic balance was shifting faster than the established powers could adapt. You have 1 hour, David concluded. Decide whether you want to be part of the galaxy's future or a footnote in its history. His image disappeared, leaving the assembled fleet commanders to confront a reality they had never imagined. Humanity hadn't just achieved technological superiority, they had outgrown the need for galactic approval entirely. 6 months later, Ambassador David Cross stood once again in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, but everything had changed. The towering seats that had once symbolized absolute authority now felt more like a classroom where humanity served as teacher to civilizations learning to see beyond their ancient limitations. The assembled delegates bore little resemblance to the confident rulers who had first summoned him here. High Counselor Vex's scales had lost their lustrous sheen of dominance. Admiral Krex's 6 arms moved with less aggressive certainty, and General Wrath's mechanical components seemed dimmed, as if his very systems reflected the diminished status of military solutions in the new galactic order. The Terran Cooperation Accords have been in effect for 183 standard days, David announced, his voice carrying easily through the chamber without need for the intimidating amplification systems of the past. The results speak for themselves. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing statistical analyses that told the story of unprecedented change. Interstellar conflicts had dropped to 0. Trade volume had increased by 60%. Scientific cooperation had accelerated technological development beyond anything in recorded galactic history. The hegemony's bioengineering expertise, combined with human nanotechnology, has resulted in terraforming techniques that can transform dead worlds into garden paradises in decades rather than millennia, David continued, gesturing to images of worlds that had been barren rock 6 months ago and now pulsed with vibrant life. Captain Zila's dimensional form flickered with what the translation systems interpreted as amazement. The efficiency gains are undeniable. Projects that would have taken our civilization centuries are being completed in months. Because you're no longer fighting each other over resources, David explained. When the crystal hegemony's energy manipulation technology is combined with iron fleet automation and void walker dimensional engineering, the results transcend what any single species could achieve alone. The displays showed massive construction projects throughout the galaxy, orbital cities that defied conventional physics, transportation networks that folded space itself, research facilities where dozens of species worked together on problems that had been considered unsolvable. Commander Thork's cybernetic eye focused on economic data that showed unprecedented prosperity. The trade agreements have eliminated the resource conflicts that have defined galactic politics for millennia. But at what cost? Our civilizations are no longer masters of their own destiny. Were you ever? The question came not from David, but from Dr. Elena Martinez, humanity's chief scientific coordinator, who materialized beside him in holographic form. When we first encountered galactic civilization, your species were locked in endless cycles of territorial disputes and technological stagnation. You called it independence, but it was really just sophisticated barbarism. She activated displays showing comparative analyses spanning the past 1,000 years. Galactic population growth under the old system, minimal and concentrated in core worlds. Technological advancement, limited to weapons development and resource extraction. Interstellar cooperation, practically non-existent except when forced by external threats. The data painted an unflattering picture of what galactic civilization had become before humanity's intervention. Admiral, Krex's voice carried undertones of reluctant acceptance. But you've fundamentally altered the way we approach every aspect of civilization. Our military doctrines, our economic systems, even our social structures. Yes, David acknowledged, because they weren't working. Your civilizations had achieved a kind of stable mediocrity that prevented growth while maintaining the illusion of progress. He gestured to new displays showing population centers throughout the galaxy. Where once there had been overcrowded core worlds and empty frontier systems, now there was balanced development that utilized the full potential of galactic space. Humanity didn't seek to conquer you, David explained. We sought to save you from yourselves. Your species were dying slowly, comfortably, but inevitably. You were so focused on maintaining existing power structures that you'd forgotten how to adapt and grow. High Counselor Vex found his voice at last, though it lacked the commanding authority of 6 months ago. And if we had chosen to resist this transformation? If we had fought to maintain our traditional ways? David's expression didn't change, but the chamber's lighting seemed to dim slightly. You tried that, Counselor. The result was the complete neutralization of the largest military force in galactic history within 47 minutes. Resistance was never really an option. The silence that followed carried the weight of memory. Every delegate recalled the aftermath of that failed military response. Not just the technological defeat, but the complete restructuring of galactic civilization that had followed with inexorable efficiency. However, David continued, his tone lightening, cooperation has proven far more rewarding than coercion. Those civilizations that embrace the new paradigm have discovered possibilities they never imagined. The displays showed the fruits of that cooperation, artistic collaborations between species that experienced reality in fundamentally different ways. Scientific breakthroughs that emerged from combining incompatible theoretical frameworks, cultural exchanges that expanded the definition of consciousness itself. The quantum collective's consciousness transfer technology, enhanced by human neural engineering, has eliminated the concept of death for willing participants, Dr. Martinez added. The Warsinger clan's harmonic manipulation abilities, guided by human mathematical principles, can now reshape matter at the molecular level. Captain Zella phased partially into another dimension, a sign of excitement in her species. The possibilities seem unlimited. Projects we're developing now will reshape the fundamental nature of existence. That's the point, David said. Humanity learned early that the universe is vast enough for everyone to grow without taking from others. Scarcity is a choice, not a natural law. He walked to the chamber's great viewing portal, where the lights of humanity's transformed galaxy were visible against the starfield. Massive construction projects stretched across star systems, their scale and ambition dwarfing anything previously imagined. For 50 years, we watched galactic civilization stagnate while squabbling over territories and resources that represented a tiny fraction of available space. David continued, you were fighting over crumbs while standing in a bakery. When he turned back to face the assembly, his eyes held the vision of a future that none of them could have conceived alone. The question now isn't whether you accept humanity's leadership. The question is whether you're ready to help us build something worthy of the galaxy's potential. Admiral Krex leaned forward, his military instincts finally adapting to a universe where cooperation yielded greater results than conquest. What exactly are you proposing? David smiled, and this time the expression held genuine warmth and excitement. Intergalactic exploration. The construction of vessels capable of reaching Andromeda and beyond. The establishment of a truly universal civilization that spans multiple galaxies. The scope of the vision took their breath away. Where they had been thinking in terms of star systems and sectors, humanity was planning for scales that encompassed millions of galaxies. Welcome to humanity's galaxy, David concluded, looking around at the assembled delegates who had once been his judges and were now his partners. But more importantly, welcome to the first step toward humanity's universe. Outside the chamber, human vessels moved with quiet efficiency through space that had once been a battleground, carrying the dreams and ambitions of dozens of species toward a future that none of them could have achieved alone. The galaxy had indeed realized too late that humanity's fleet was already there. But perhaps in the end, that recognition had come at exactly the right moment to save galactic civilization from its own limitations and guide it toward something truly magnificent. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would reshape not just the galaxy, but the very concept of what intelligent life could accomplish when it stopped fighting itself and started reaching for the stars.